Hello ladies and gentlemen, this video is here to show you how I make videos, totally free with just my computer and a little bit of a time investment. Using pretty much this exact same setup, I've made videos that have reached 18,000 views and 12,000 views respectively, which is pretty good for a free setup. I want to illustrate a decent amount of helpful information so that after you finish this video, you can go out and make one right away. There will be links in the description that I will try to keep up to date. I've actually wanted to make this video for a long time, because I just want to see more creators getting out there and not being so nervous to start with a big commitment. You just don't need to put forth such a hefty investment starting out. You can make great content without throwing any money at it until you are ready. So, I'm going to give you all the tools that you need right here in this video, and I'm going to teach you a bit on how to use each one and how they contribute to the process. The intent here is not to tell you how to come up with an idea or start conceptualizing a script. I'm going to assume you have an idea and passion, and you just need to know how to get started. Let me know if you'd like a video that goes over that topic too though, and I'll see about making it if there's demand for it. Right now though, we have an idea and we're trying to bring that idea to life. So, here are all the free tools and tricks that I use to make a YouTube video. Typically, the first thing that I do is write a script for the video. I recommend using something like Google Docs to get started. You can write on one device and instantly access it on another, and it is a very convenient way to do script reading from a phone just after writing it on a computer. A Google account is totally free and easy to set up. But you can still write the script on something like WordPad or even Notepad, and then just use a wire to put it on the device you want to read it from. For the sake of being true to the premise of this video though, I'm going to record the voiceover for it by using my cell phone as a microphone. One nice thing about scripts is that they don't necessarily have to be grammatically correct because no one will ever see it, as long as you understand what you were trying to write and what intention you have for the way that you'll say the words. Before you start reading your script into a microphone though, I really recommend that you read over it 2 or 3 times out loud. If it's a particularly long script, that may not be feasible. You don't want the script to be hard to read out loud, but you want it to be engaging. Varying the length of your sentences and making sure to diversify the words you use can help make an entertaining video. Another good reason to read it out loud is that you'll catch the longer sentences easier this way if you find that you're getting out of breath. In a broader sense though, it familiarizes you with what you wrote and you are less likely to make mistakes when you record the actual voiceover. Then, what I mean by diversifying your words is to really try not to let the same words appear too many times in a given paragraph. It gets tedious if you wrote something like, "This game is a good game that has good gameplay and good game feel." That would be a hassle for you to read too. If you wrote something a little more engaging like, "This game is a satisfying experience with well-designed systems and a powerful game feel to keep you invested." Just like that, the sentence is easier to read and less tiresome to hear. Try to let some time pass between each table read and the actual recording itself as well. This is to give yourself time to process it and let your voice rest a little too. The free version of Grammarly can really help with minor issues in a script, and when used in conjunction with inbuilt features for Google Docs, it will help you not look like an idiot while writing. Make sure to charge your laptop while you work, if you're writing on a laptop. To minimize the chance of losing work, it's a good idea to do that throughout the whole video making process. Nothing is more discouraging than losing work when making videos. Once you have a script, you can get your phone out and huddle under a blanket for sound dampening. If you're using a cell phone, you'll want to maximize the quality you're getting out of it as much as you can. If your phone doesn't have one by default, you can download a nice free sound recorder app. I won't recommend a specific app, but I've gotten some decent audio from the Easy Voice Recorder on the Play Store. There are tons of these though, so you don't have to use that exactly. If you're wanting to get an estimate of how long the finished voice recording will be, to prepare yourself mentally for the task and make sure you have enough time to do it. If you already have a video and you're settled on a vocal style, you can select a point in the script, find it in the video, and find out how far you got in the script in a minute's time. Then you can take that as your WPM, or the words per minute. Mine averages at about 190. For example, my video entitled The Fall of the House of Madrigal has a script that is 3,563 words long. When I take that and divide it by 190, it gives me about 18.75, with 75% of the minute being equal to 45 seconds. With an estimate of 18 minutes and 45 seconds, the video actually came out to 18 minutes and 34 seconds, meaning that for this video, I spoke even faster than 190 WPM. That leaves the margin of error for that rough estimate to be at about 11 seconds. If you just want to guess though, 160 WPM is a decent time estimate for all your good vocal takes in a row. There are a few things to keep in mind when voice recording. If I understand it correctly, The phone attempts to reduce the likelihood of popping when you say the letter P. But I guess I'll find out once I record this audio and play it back. To be safe though, don't point the microphone directly at your mouth. Try a few different things to find a comfortable position where you can see your phone screen and get nice audio that doesn't sound muffled. Once you're ready to start actually recording though, I recommend leaving a few seconds at the beginning of the recording where you just let the microphone pick up the ambience of the room around you. We'll need this later when we edit the audio. You can do this at the beginning or the end of the audio file though, both work fine. Then pull up your script on your phone and just start reading. Don't be afraid to do multiple takes over and over again until you get the inflection to sound just right. Because you might be speaking clearly and delivering the line well, but you don't want the flow of conversation to sound unnatural, or like you're reading off of a script. Actually, you shouldn't be afraid to go off the script if you feel like there is a better way to say it when you're making your own videos. You wrote the script, and you are not beholden to it exactly. Whatever feels natural in the moment is what you want to shoot for. You should do what you want for your own style, but regardless of that, no matter what, I recommend going about 30% over the energy level you're aiming for, because you may sound totally normal to yourself, but when you play it back you'll find that a recording somehow reduces the energy level of both audio and video recordings of yourself. This is also a style choice though, so if it's what you're going for, just keep it in mind. When you're doing another take, do not start it right away. You'll be surprised at how much time you need to delay to get a clean cutaway of sound from one take to the next when editing audio. If you try the line again too quickly, the beginning will need to be carefully removed from the ending of the last take. So leave some breathing room between each attempt at a line. It's more than you think. You'll start to get a feel for it with practice though. Try to keep in the back of your head which take you thought was the best, just in a vague sense, like, I feel like the third take of the 5 was the best, for example, just for reference later. With all that in mind, then you just have to read the whole thing out loud, making sure to sip water occasionally to keep your lips from smacking as much, as well as to not get too hot under the blanket. Then, after you're done, you can use a wire to put the audio on the computer, or just upload it onto Google Drive and download it onto the computer that you're working on. I do recommend trying to record the whole thing at once if it isn't too long. You might not be used to talking so much though, so it could be infeasible. No matter what you do or how exactly the same you make your setup, the audio will come out slightly different for each recording session. So try to do it in one shot to make it sound more consistent. It also helps you keep your speaking energy consistent as well, which can make it less distracting than having it constantly shift throughout the video. You technically have a few options for audio editing software, but that doesn't matter at all because it's pretty much the industry standard to use Audacity, and it's freely available and very easy to use once you understand it, so it is definitely what I recommend. Alright, now import the file into Audacity using drag and drop, and then drag the cursor across the ambient seconds at the beginning of the recording, and go to the Effects tab and click Noise Reduction. Then click Get Noise Profile. This will close the window, and Audacity will use that clip as the noise profile for any noise reduction done for the rest of the session. Then press Ctrl-A and select the whole recording, and go back to the Noise Reduction tab and click the OK button. This will help clean the audio of background noises and room ambience. Ideally, up on the right side here, you want the audio to stay in the green, but never surpass yellow. Beyond that, the audio can sound grating and start to clip, making it even worse. If this happens, you can try using Clip Fix and rebalancing the audio through the other effects until it sounds more like what you wanted it to. I recommend listening to the voiceover on headphones and on speakers. Then you just go through the whole audio clip and take out the takes that didn't quite take, and leave in what you like. Just drag across bad takes, hit delete, or just cut and don't ever paste. That works too. Your delivery will really affect how long a video is relative to the word count. See the script writing section. It might not be part of your style, but I personally find that it helps to vary your inflections and try to line them up with what you're saying in a way that feels organic and makes sense. Kinda like I'm doing right now. When you finish editing your audio track, you simply export it as an MP3 or a WAV. In my understanding, MP3 is better for space, WAV is better for quality. I typically use WAV when I'm making videos. After my video titled 10 Forgotten Wii Games came out on August 14th of 2020, I had to switch to a new video editing software. I was actually cutting it close getting that video out at all. When I went to edit any last things that needed fixing in that video, the software would crash. For some reason though, if I booted it up and instantly went to export the video, that was fine. I don't know if I simply had too large of a file or what, but I do know that the computer was old. So then I looked around online for good free options to start with. I found out about a couple, and I have tried a few, but I like OpenShot the most of the freely available ones. If you're clever about how you use it, it's pretty nearly a fully featured video editing software. For the videos I make, I like to include simple animations or motion graphics to keep the experience engaging and entertaining. OpenShot is capable of pretty much whatever location, rotation, and scale animations that you could need. You can usually finagle whatever you're envisioning for your video if you're smart about your keyframes. Back when I first started using OpenShot, it was very unstable, but in the past few releases it has become nearly rock solid. I would have to save all the time because I was worried if it would suddenly crash on me, but nowadays it's a much more secure user experience. That isn't just going to crash constantly. Even when that was the case though, OpenShot has an autosave feature that you can manually set the frequency of. For it to work though, you have to make sure that you save the first time and give it a disk location. Alright, I want to explain some basics on how to use OpenShot to get you started. It is true that it is a non-linear video editor, but I personally find that pointless to say, because the only linear video editing is done by hand and most people just don't do that with film anymore. Technically though, yes, this is what is called a non-linear video editor. They generally look something like this. This is the layout that I like, with my project files on the right, as well as my other major tabs, and my properties here on the left, then my timeline across the bottom. This is just what works best for me in my workflow. It is really easy to quickly arrange the layout to whatever is most comfortable for you though. You can import files through the import menu, or like a sane person, you can just drag and drop them into the project files. I'm going to do that now with our exported Audacity file from earlier as well. Then you can add it to the timeline. The point furthest to the left is the beginning of the video. So if you want something on screen for the first frame of the video, just make sure that you put it here at the beginning. If you need to adjust the size of something, you can do so by just making sure to select it on the timeline. When you do, you'll get these transform handles to adjust the file with. You can also modify it here in the properties. You may notice that these turned green when I did that. That green is actually indicative of a keyframe. This happened because I didn't place the playhead at the first frame of the clip. What the editor will do is start the object with its default properties and then transition to the keyframe I set. This is how you animate things. You go to the first frame of the file on screen and then set it how you want it to show up. I'm going to move it over here to illustrate for you what I mean. Now, the first frame it appears will be modified to my specification. You can also make it fade in by adjusting its alpha channel on the first frame, and then go to the point at which you want it to be done fading, and put another frame of alpha being set to 1. That's how all animations work. You tell it what it looks like on this frame, and then you move over and tell it what it looks like in this later frame, and it will interpolate the values between the two frames. If you ever wanted to stay stable in one spot before moving again, add a stretch of time on the video where the keyframes are repeated. So if I add this same exact keyframes here, I can then animate its position again without it just moving directly there the whole time. That's basically how animation works in OpenShot. You can also layer animations on top of each other. The layers on top are what will appear over the layers below in the video itself. So if I put one here, it'll be above, but if I move it below, it suddenly switches to underneath. To adjust the length of a given clip, you can just drag either end until you reach the point you were looking to cut. Or just find where you want to make the cut, and then right-click to select that clip, and just click Split. You have a few options in how you want to split that will depend on what you need from the clip. Then you have the Effects tab, which will let you do things like dynamically crop a clip, or color shift it. These are things you just need to play with to get a feel for them. But if you feel there's any effect you can't just achieve by using animations and effects, it's probably a good idea to get GIMP involved. By GIMP, I mean the open source picture editing software. GIMP stands for GNU Image Manipulation Program. It's a bit like a free Photoshop, but most people would argue worse. I would argue that I haven't really used Photoshop, but I've gotten away with a lot in GIMP. For example, one way to mix the two applications together to get things to look the way you want is to take an image that is what you need, but has more of a background than you might be desiring for your video. Drag and drop the object in a GIMP, and it'll automatically set a canvas size for you. Right-click on this down here, the layer the image itself is on, and select Add Alpha if it doesn't already have one. Then, depending on the image itself, you will need to either manually cut the image out, or if the background is consistent, you can do a few things like using the continuous selection, aka the magic wand tool, to select similarly colored pixels, and then drag up and down to adjust the threshold as needed to get everything in the background. You can also switch this tool to its alternate option, which is Select by Color. Depending on the picture, it might work better or worse. Then you can just delete it. There are some other options that might make your delete better or worse, and there are ways to make sure your image looks more consistent. But this is the easiest way to change something into a cleaner PNG. Speaking of, then all you have to do is save the file as a PNG to wherever you are putting your working files. And finally, just drag that into your OpenShot project. Then you have a nice animatable graphic to use. You can also use GIMP to do helpful stuff like expanding the canvas size around an object so that you can more effectively use motion blur in OpenShot. Many effects in OpenShot are all limited to the actual size of the picture, so it might be helpful to have some bleed room on pictures you intend to use this way, or else effects will have hard edges that don't usually look great. A more extreme edit than what can be done with OpenShot's effects can be done here in GIMP though. Sometimes I make multiple versions of the same asset and blend between them to convey the idea of a scene. If I'm trying to use this video to discuss some of the most basic useful stuff that I can though, I must say, GIMP is a great way to make backgrounds for a video. For my Cinderella video, I would take screenshots of the movie and then edit people out of them to give me a nice and clean environment that was less distracting, upon which I can animate on top of using the keyframes in OpenShot. The easiest way to edit photos to be better in the background is to go over here to the stamp tool, which lets you essentially use a portion of the picture as the brush content you're painting with. You can use the content of the existing picture along with some basic assumptions to remove characters from the world. To use the stamp, you just select it and then use Ctrl and click a spot. Then when you click to paint, you will paint that spot. And if you move the brush around, the reference point will actually move relatively. So, if you don't want to do that, you can just repeatedly press the initial stamp down again to fill out the area. Then if you want, you can animate the character back to that position and make your own little transition that makes the video a bit more engaging. Just take a copy of the same base image on the initial layer and cut out the character using the lasso select tool, and then you can use keyframes to animate them back here as I showed before. This adds motion to what would otherwise be a static image on screen. Be careful with this though, because if you're anything like me, you'll end up spending an hour editing things to get a 1-second shot that I feel like adds just enough to barely be worth it. Try to be economic with your time. After exporting both layers as their own image by disabling one layer or the other and then exporting, or enabling export layers to handle that for you. We now have two images to bring into OpenShot to animate the aforementioned scene. By just putting him here and sizing him correctly for his first frame, and then saving his location, I can now move down the timeline to his intended position, save the keyframes I want him to have, and then go back to the beginning and move him off screen or wherever I want him to start at. Just like that, the video has more personality and an effortful feel. So what do you do if you need stock footage for some reason? Well, there are two options that I like. For a long time, I was just using Pixabay, and that worked great. But recently, I found out about Pexels, and have found them really useful for stock footage that'll work well for the Did You Hear shorts. Both are great resources. But as far as I know, all the pictures on both sites are free to use, with possible exceptions. They are high quality though, and help you fill out the visual content of your video. One thing that helps motion graphics feel better, or more weighty, are just some sound effects to go along with the movement. FreeSound.org is a great resource for finding some sound that you need that you aren't in a position to make. Simply go here and create an account, and then when you search something, remember to set your search to Creative Commons. Anything with the 0 listed next to it is totally free to use without worry. Adding these sounds to match up with movements can be good for videos, depending on your style. But even if you don't want to do that, FreeSound is still a good resource for other possible needs you might have for video editing. If you decide to do this though, it's better to be safe with the sound mixing by putting it a little quieter than you probably feel like it should be. If you're talking over the video, that is the part that you want emphasized. Although don't be afraid to adjust sound balancing and re-export videos as needed. Speaking of sound, YouTube Studio is a great resource for finding songs that are safe to use copyright-free in videos. Just go to YouTube Studio and scroll all the way to the bottom for the audio library, click it, and it'll take you there. You can then tell it what you're going for in the video, and make sure the attribution is free again, and download the song, then add it to the OpenShot project by dragging it in. For music, I typically go down here to the audio and tell it to adjust to about 10%, or sometimes less, to make sure that the voice is able to be sufficiently heard over the song. I like to stick that at the bottom of the layers and work from there, building all the layers on top of that basis. But now we have all these assets, and you find that you can't just find exactly what you want, or you need some graphics or something of that ilk to illustrate a point. You're going to want the open source art application Krita. In Krita, as opposed to GIMP, you have way more tools to create images as opposed to manipulating existing ones. For making the Did You Hear logo, I used Krita. You have brush smoothing options down here in the left tab, which affects brush properties to help make your lines look cleaner. Then using the wand tool to select spaces you want to make a certain color. Up on the left, click the Select tab and tell it you would like to grow and give it a comfortable number of pixels relative to the size of the image as a whole to expand past the exact perimeter of the line art. Then make a new layer and put it underneath the lines. Use this for coloring the art. You can make gradients with this tool, or just use paint fill to fill in the space, and then use a brush to make it closer to what you wanted. These are some of the most used tools for me in Krita, and they help making drawing of a specific thing I need go a lot smoother. For the DYH logo, I drew it and colored it this way, and then I used the gradient tool to give it more depth, which just has you pick colors to gradient between and then drag it across the desired distance. Speaking of logos though, what if you want a nice consistent logo? Or you're working on a thumbnail and need a very specific look for your text to match what you're talking about? In those scenarios, I use FontMeme. So, the way FontMeme works is you can look at all kinds of fonts, and it even has close estimates for fonts that you've seen in media. If you happen to need the Star Wars Battlefront 2 font, for example, you can look it up and they will tell you if they found it or something close to it, and if it's free to use. They aren't always free to use, but sometimes they are, and it's that easy. You can also just search through and find what you need using the free to use font section, or search and just be careful to make sure you find one that is free. Once you have one you want, FontMeme has a really handy feature for video editors. You have the font preview down at the bottom of the page. If you just change nothing and hit generate, you'll get your font written in the text of your choice. But if you change the size, it'll scale the font up accordingly and give it more pixels in the process. If you need the graphic to be more clean and sharp, bump this number up to about 200-ish. Then you have two drop-downs. The top one is more for font family or related fonts, but the bottom one is more for doing stylized manipulations to the font. You have tons of great options here to work with, and you'll find whatever you need, or very close to whatever you need here, and then you can finish it off with whatever changes you may want to adjust for in GIMP, or depending on what you need, in Krita. So to get the file, you can just right-click the preview and save it. That's it. You have a nice set of stylish text to use in your videos. You don't even have to download the whole font because the preview just generates whatever you need. What else could you do with these graphics though? Well, depending on what you want to use them for, you can now go into OBS. OBS, or Open Broadcaster Software, is another pretty industry standard application. Some people use OBS Streamlabs, but just for making a video, we'll stick to the original. In this little box here towards the bottom left middle, we have the things that will appear in the scene. It's empty now, so we need to add some things. If you're going to be posting gameplay, you'll want to go to the game source and select what you're currently playing. It'll only show up if the window is open though. Then you can adjust it to fit your layout by making it smaller or larger using the transform handles. You can also add images to OBS in a similar way by going down here and selecting image sources from the Add Source menu. Then just click to add your image, and you've got it in your scene. If you had a webcam, you can add it here too. Just go to Video Capture Source and find your webcam, and you can add that on top. This is basically how OBS works. You can actually adjust the values of these sources while you're recording or streaming too, if that's what you want. If not, to be safe, you can just lock them. If you had a capture card though, you would add it by plugging it in and selecting it from the video capture sources. Now you have a decent idea of how to compose a scene in OBS. Lastly, you'll want to go into settings and make sure that video settings are what you're looking for. Now, it's pretty much the minimum to use 1920 by 1080 HD. And then set this output here to MKV, and pick a location you're happy with. This isn't the final file format for our video, but it's good to have this interim step in case something happens and a file would get messed up. This file format will help us recover the video itself up until that point. Once you're ready to use the video in something like OpenShot though, just go up here to the files and click Remux. Select your MKV file and set it to Remux. It should then give you an MP4 file, which is all we needed, and we can drag it back into OpenShot. Now we can edit around it using the things we learned in OpenShot earlier. One thing I didn't mention is OpenShot also supports transitions by just dragging one clip into another far enough. It will realize that you wish to transition between them, and by default, I believe it uses fade. You have more options for transitions though in the Transitions tab. By just overlapping the clips and selecting the transition you want and dragging it onto the overlap, and double checking that it is facing the right way, you can get some fun video effects out of it. Be mindful though, the transitions don't actually fade out the clip being transitioned from, and depending on your needs, you might still have to do that yourself. Once the video is what you wanted, you can export it here. Select an output folder and select your desired quality. Like I said before, the minimum quality to go for is a 1920 by 1080. The frame rate is really a style choice unto itself, but for the sake of a smooth video, you can go with 60, as long as you're aware that it will take longer to process than something like 24 frames per second would. While the video is exporting, we need to come up with a thumbnail, so let's transition to the last major website we're going to discuss in this video. Thumbnail making is important to get right. First, you just want a simple system to compose the layout. And second, you want to make sure that you have the right size to fit a thumbnail correctly. So signing up for a Canva account, or just signing in with your Google account, you have access to a pretty powerful tool for a lot of graphic design uses. But we're here right now for thumbnails. Select New and find the YouTube thumbnail option and click into it. Now, we have a white screen on the right and a menu on the left. Depending on your needs, you might just be able to combine some assets from the video itself with some graphics from FontMeme to create a great thumbnail that perfectly illustrates your video. Things to keep in mind though. You want it to be pretty tangible at a very small size, so throughout the process you'll want to zoom in and out to see if it's clear or not. You also want to make sure the text is fully legible in the same way. It can help text pop out and be easy to read regardless of backgrounds by having white text with a black outline. You'll also want to be careful to keep your thumbnails focused off the very periphery of the image. Try to keep things relatively centered. They don't have to be perfectly centered though, it's a feel thing. You also need to remember that the timestamp for the video will be on the bottom right, so try to leave some breathing room for it. Putting something there might make it hard to see as a result. Just make sure it's engaging, appealing, and works at any size. Then you can just download it, and when you're uploading your YouTube video, you can add the thumbnail using the custom thumbnail option. This video is long enough without talking about SEO optimization for the initial phases of making a video, but just add your description and add your tags, and come up with a title that accurately describes your video in an eye-catching way. Don't forget to add relevant hashtags to the description or the title. Just like that, you're done, and you've spent way longer than you meant to making a video. If you work on something you're passionate about though, the worst you can do is enjoy yourself and have something fun to share with friends and family. Subscribe if you liked listening to me, found this information helpful, or decided you were interested in some of the other videos that I mentioned. Let me know if you want more tutorial help with some of these applications, or have any questions. This was just a very cursory look at some very basic functions that I find super helpful and thought you guys might too. Jesus loves you and so do I. Tune in next time and goodbye.